is of the opinion that there is the possibility that Mariette could have been drugged and hypnotized to commit the deed.
Well, what do you think could the explanation then be for her allegedly committing a violent deed like murder?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously my responsibility as the forensic psychologist is not to, say if she's guilty or not.
Dr. Willifee diagnosed Mariette with dissociative fugue. The elements of this mental disorder are the following. Patients suffering from fugue may physically travel away from their homes and fail to remember important aspects of their previous identities, such as their names, family, and occupations. When they eventually return to their former selves, they can remember the onset of the amnesia, but they cannot remember anything about the period of the fugue. Fugue can be caused by severe trauma. Dr. Willifee said, if Mariette or her children's safety had been threatened, it could have been traumatic enough to cause dissociative fugue. The question arises, if Mariette did have dissociative fugue, how come she knew her own identity? And how would she have been able to travel to a family friend to fetch her late husband's firearm? She also spoke to her sister-in-law during this so-called fugue period. Why could she remember all these details later? If she suffered from dissociative fugue, she would have had amnesia. Advocate Fashole Luke, who has the reputation of never having failed in saving a client from the gallows before, acted as Mariette's defense attorney.
Hello, Mr. Luke.
Hello, good
I'm
evening.
Sandra.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for seeing us. And this is Michelle, Mr. Luke.
Hello, madam. Nice to meet you. Why don't you have a seat?
Thank you very much. The psychologist, Dr. Louise Willifee, did an assessment of Mariette. Did her report help you in your defense?
We endeavored to use that. I don't think the judge really found it of use in affecting his verdict in any way whatsoever.
A part of Mariette's defense was that Henny Coetzee had hypnotized and drugged her 2 days before the murder, and under his command she went to fetch her late husband's 9mm from a friend, Mr. Dennis Weber, in Petersburg. She smuggled the firearm over the border and said she took it to Henny Coetzee, who wanted to buy it. She said she left it on his desk the afternoon before the murder.
I think the statement that Henny could have hypnotized Mariette and drugged her, and that she went to fetch the gun under his influence, is very far-fetched. Also, remember, Tinny was the one who persisted that Derek James, the stringer for the BBC, published the story about Henny's involvement.
Derek, how did you get involved with the Mariette Bosch case?
Mr. Tinny Wolmarans came to see me. That's how it all started. Because I've been BBC correspondent for 20 years.
Was this in the beginning of the case?
Yeah. He came to see me to tell me the version and that she was being wrongfully accused.
Right.
And for a long time I believed him. I don't say I believe him now.
Well, what did Tinny tell you?
He intimated to me that the boss of his wife, Mrs. Wolmarans, a man called Henny Coetzee, had done the deed, had left a Braaivleis on that very night, had gone and done the deed and not returned to the Braaivleis. And he was convinced that it had been done by Mr. Coetzee, who then went to Ghana. But interestingly enough, Mr. Coetzee came back to give evidence at some stage, which was surprising if he was guilty. Usually when a person flees the country, they never come back. So my initial belief was that Mr. Henny Coetzee was the guilty party, and Mr. Tinny Wolmarans and Mrs. Bosch came to see me a couple of times on the basis that I do or did BBC broadcasting, saying that Mrs. Bosch was wrongfully accused and that the guilty party was Mr. Coetzee. I'm not so sure he was now. Tinny's a very forceful character. Mrs. Bosch was very reticent. In fact, she came into this office often, never said one word. All the talking was done by Tinny. So, did Tinny do it? Possibly. Did Mrs. Bosch do it? Most likely. Did Henny do it? Looked like it at the beginning, but not subsequently. One doesn't think he did it.
You know, one thing that puzzles me is that why would Henny Coetzee want to buy an unlicensed firearm from Mariette? I mean, that is illegal. If he already had the very same pistol in his possession, after all, he was a hunter.
Also remember, the Botswana government never suspected Henny. He was never a suspect, and Mr. Mack also gave him indemnity to return from Ghana to come to Botswana to come and testify.
Henny Coetzee was given indemnity. Could you tell me why he was given indemnity?
Listen, Henny got transferred to Ghana
Yes.
when I think they were establishing an office in Ghana. So he got transferred. And when he was there, all these stories about Henny being the man behind this incident and having been given a pistol and whatnot, then came out. And when I took charge of the case, he was not even initial in the summary of evidence.
No.
He was not even listed as one of the witnesses by the state. So because of these reports in the newspapers, and in fact, most of these reports in the newspaper, I read them when I was outside the country.
Right.
I wasn't even here when the incident took place, but I read about them, and I remembered that, and I decided, no, then Henny must be called, not really to substantiate the state's case, but to present him to the defense for cross-examination, because their story is, you did it, Henny. So that was the whole idea behind it. So Henny initially was a bit uncomfortable. He thought, no, I'm just luring him from Ghana to Botswana so that he can be arrested and whatnot. I assured him. And obviously, as a human being, I suppose, he decided, okay, he needs to get some advice. And he got advice from a lawyer in South Africa, Adam Anderson, an attorney. And Adam Anderson, as an attorney, unsurprisingly requested me to show my bona fides by issuing an indemnity.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Which was quite fair. And
Yeah.
I didn't hesitate, actually, to prepare that indemnity. And that was it. Henny has always been innocent.
Mr. Mack granted indemnity to Mr. Coetzee. Did you cross-examine Mr. Coetzee?
My cross-examination of Mr. Coetzee was based on instructions given to me by my client, what I thought or did not think about it.